Yo, welcome back to Cage Calculated. Today, we're going to be playing Matchmaker. I am Hunter Campbell. I am the 20% of Dana White that still gives a shit about the UFC. I'm going to be doing matchmaking for all the top 5 fighters pretty much of the UFC right now and trying to see where their fights are going to go. There's only a couple of the top 5 fighters that are like currently booked for fights. So why not, take advantage of this time to play matchmaker. It's one of my favorite things to do. Before we get started though, I want to take some accountability. I went 6 of 14 on my Houston picks. Fluffy Hernandez decided to get mogged by Sean Strickland. Chidi and Joe Kawani looked like a joke. Who else lost? I got Mackenzie Acosta right because I'm the GOAT and I love Mackenzie Acosta there. I'm not the GOAT though. I'm a fraud and I am washed. I apologize. That's why I didn't put any betting lines because I knew that I would cost you money and I luckily didn't cost myself money, but a lot of people seem to lost money on that Houston card. I'm not like too upset because it seems like everyone didn't do too hot, but like that was bad. I did not do good. So I apologize. We're gonna take accountability. We're gonna grow from this. We're gonna get better. I'm still learning, but yeah, dude, that was a fraud check of the greatest ever. That was sad. So let's hop into this. Let's do some matchmaking, and we're gonna start in the flyweight division with Joshua Van versus Tatsuro Taira. This has already been booked for UFC 327. Not much to say about it. I like the fight. There's a couple ways you could have gone with Joshua Van. You could have gone a Manel Kape way. You could have waited around for Pantoja to get healthy. But I like Tatsuro Taira. I think he's a fun matchup. I do think Joshua Van will win this just on first glance and first opinion. But you never know. I mean, this is going to be a fun stylistic matchup. A little bit more grappling heavy Tatsuro Taira, but it kind of reminds me of the Joshua Van versus Ray Saruya fight where Ray Saruya was so grapple heavy and so ground focused that Joshua Van was just able to box him and piece him up. I think Tatsuro Taira is going to be a little bit better, obviously, than Ray Saruya, but I think it's going to be similar. I think Joshua Van's going to piece him up with the boxing, really showcase that skill. I mean, he's just one of the greatest in the flyweight division at his striking, so I think that's going to be what happens in this one. I'm not going to be too shocked if Joshua Van wins this. I'd be a little bit more surprised if Tatsuro Taira was able to get this one. And then the other matchup we'll make is Pantoja fighting the winner of this one. I think once he gets healthy, he deserves a rematch to get the belt back. He had a freak injury. I think that's completely fine in this scenario. I think that Pantoja is one of the GOATs of the flyweight division of all time. Give him a rematch, again, losing in such a crazy way. I'd love to see him fight Joshua Van. Tatsuro Taira would be interesting. I have no idea what I would really think about that one. I would think, Pantoja would just whoop his ass, but, you never know. You never know what's going on. So that would be the rematch for Pantoja. And then moving on to the next one, I have Manel Kape taking on Kyoji Horiguchi. And deep cut ball knowers know these two fought in 2017. These two have fought, and Manel Kape got submitted by Kyoji Horiguchi by an armbar. But that was, almost 9 years ago now. So these guys are back in the top 5. Manel Kape, I thought, might have gotten a chance at the title next. He's not. Let's get a title eliminator bout ready. Let's get these two fighting. So, if Pantoja's not healthy, you can get the winner of this one against either Van or Tatsuro Taira. Maybe you wait around until Pantoja fights. You just kind of set up the next fight and kind of keep it rolling in the division. And I think it's just a fun matchup. I mean, Manel Kape's a superpower guy in the flyweight division. Kyoji Horiguchi is just that slick striker. We saw him just absolutely destroy Amir Albazi, just looked like Kyoji Horiguchi of old. And, I'm a big Kyoji Horiguchi fan. So if we're not getting the Tatsuro Taira Horiguchi fight in Japan, I think this is a good second. I still think this one could be in Japan. Manel Kape has fandom in Japan. Kyoji Horiguchi obviously from there. So I think this is a good stylistic matchup and a good, fan matchup that you could put as like a main event for a fight night card or even as a co-main event on any numbered event. So I would really like this one. I think this would be super fun. And then we move on to somehow Brandon Royval still being in the top 5, taking on Amir Albazi. I think this is another fun stylistic matchup. Royval being a little bit more of a striker. Albazi kind of, again, got pieced up by Horiguchi. So this is kind of a get back in the flow of things fight. Both these guys are on 2-fight losing streaks. This is kind of a top 7 eliminator. Who's going to be the kind of gatekeeper of the division and who's actually going to be in title contention soon. So it kind of puts things into perspective for the flyweight division for both of these guys' career, both of them on that losing streak. You just don't want to see it for either one of them. I love Brandon Royval. I don't really have much of an opinion on Amir Albazi, but he's a good fighter. I think both these guys are capable of fighting in championship bouts. Obviously, Royval has already fought in championship bouts before, but it's just kind of placing these guys in a spot where, okay, we know where their career trajectory is going to go, and I think this would be, again, a fun fight, especially being, the striker versus the wrestling stylistic. I mean, we love those. The UFC seems to love those, and it's just a matchup that kind of makes sense. Moving into the bantamweight division, this is the fight to make. Petr Yan versus Merab 3. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. That first fight, obviously Merab was able to get it done, and then you see Yan have an absolute masterclass at the end of 2025, just do his thing. Just look like an animal against Merab, who looked like maybe one of the GOATs in the bantamweight division. And, arguably is the GOAT. So I think everyone would be cool with this matchup. I don't think that Sean O'Malley or Umar have shown enough to get the next opportunity, especially with O'Malley losing twice. Obviously beat Song Yadong, but is that really enough to get him to a title fight? Umar, hasn't really shown that he's capable, laid on top of Davison Figueiredo for better part of 15 minutes and didn't really show us why he should be in that title fight. I think this is a good, get both of these guys back in the cage. Let's finish it up. Let's see who comes out on top. Let's see who finishes the trilogy, and then we can move on from it. I don't know who I have for this one. I would think this would probably be a good White House card fight. So I would probably lean Petr Yan just because he was able to piece up Merab so well. The striking just looked awesome. The takedowns, the cardio just looked elite. That's one of the best, MMA fights I've seen in the last couple of years. So this would be another banger. I don't think anyone loses with this one, and I think everyone would be okay with a rematch and an immediate rematch in that for Merab. Moving on, we talked about Sean O'Malley and Umar, but I think this would be a fun matchup too. These guys haven't fought before. These two are on really good trajectories. Sean O'Malley is just such a fan favorite. Both of them won their last fight, fought on the same card. I think it just makes sense on the timeline, where they are in the division, where they would be, going into this fight. Umar looks like an absolute beast, just losing to Merab in a decision. Sean O'Malley obviously getting, knocked out by Merab, or taken TKO'd by Merab, and then obviously losing to a decision. So this would make sense. It's a good title eliminator shot. Both of these guys have arguments to already have a title shot. So why don't you just pick one of the two by making them fight, make them have to get in the cage? I don't know. I would probably lean Umar. I think Umar's wrestling is just that good. He's not exciting. He's not like my fan favorite. I'm more of a Sean O'Malley, quote unquote, favorite fan. But this is a fun matchup. It's that, again, it's classic style of striker versus wrestling. You can see who gets the next title shot. You don't have to try and play politics. You can easily do this. I think this is another great White House card edition if you choose to do so. Put Sean O'Malley out there. He's super fan favorite. You could make this a fight night main event. You could make this a co-main event. There's a lot you could do with this one, and it's just a really easy one to make, in my opinion. Next, we're going to talk about Corey Sandhagen versus Ayman Zahabi. These guys kind of fight similar, and these guys are kind of in different aspects of their career. Zahabi, is he legit? That's kind of the argument that I have right now. He's beat Chito Vera. He beat, now retired Jose Aldo. Is that something that gets him into the top 5? I don't think so. If you beat Corey Sandhagen, who just recently fought in a title shot, that is a resume-building fight. I think that Zahabi is a good fighter. I don't know who I would pick in this one necessarily, but this is a fight that makes sense. Corey Sandhagen, get back on the horse, get back in that top 5 contention, come back into that title contention shot. And like we said, these previous fights, you're going to have these guys start fighting each other. And if Corey Sandhagen can win against Zahabi, you make the argument of, okay, well, if someone gets hurt, someone has to pull out of a fight, Corey Sandhagen's right there after beating Zahabi to be in the title shot, and it make at least some sense. Zahabi, if he beats Corey Sandhagen, you have the resume-building fight. You have the argument that he could be in a title fight or at least an alternate. It makes sense for the UFC, especially as building into this bantamweight division that's super, super good. I think that this is a great fight, and I would be really curious to see who would win again, because they have such a stylistically similar fight style where they're both good on the feet, they're both good on the ground. It would just be a good one to see, and I think that would make sense in the long-term picture. And then this is one of my favorite ones that I've made for bantamweight. Song Yadong, shout out Tristan, against Mario Bautista. Bautista coming off an absolute killer win against Vinicius Oliveira in a Fight Night main event in the Apex. Song Yadong just coming up short against Sean O'Malley. People think that maybe he was robbed of that one. Maybe Sean O'Malley got beat. Whatever you want to say, these two are on similar trajectories. Mario Bautista just lost to Umar. But Umar's a dog. I mean, you can't say anything negative about Umar other than he's kind of boring. So, both these guys are super fun, super exciting strikers. This would be a striker's dream. These guys fight very similar. I think this would be like who is going to be the gatekeeper, like the legitimate gatekeeper of this division, and who is going to be the title shot guy. You could put these guys up against Corey Sandhagen next. You could put these guys into a alternate spot for maybe a title eliminator. You just got so many more options with these guys, and you give them both the option of moving up the ranks. Mario Bautista, I think, is a lot better than people think, than I personally think. I think Mario Bautista, I've completely flipped my opinion on him. He looks really, really good. Obviously dominated Vinicius Oliveira, and before that he was kind of called a fraud, kind of a fighter, not super exciting, and now he's turned himself into something that's very, very marketable, watchable, something that you could put on a Fight Night main event. Song Yadong is just come up short against so many of these top guys in the division. Absolute monster. So I think this is a good spot to kind of put them into range to get a title shot, and they're both kind of on the same career path of not elite but really, really good. Next, we'll move into featherweight. So this fight's already been announced. We have Lerone Murphy against Movsar Evloev in London. This is already happening. That card absolutely sucks, by the way. But, this is going to be whoever fights Volk, right? Like, this is the Volk elimination bout. I think whoever wins this fight will fight Volk. I'm not sure I haven't really thought about where they're going to go after this fight, the loser of this fight, but both these guys are undefeated. It's a great fight. It's going to be an awesome one. And whoever fights Volk, I think if Volk's able to beat him, he solidifies himself as the greatest featherweight in UFC history. Both these guys are monsters. This would be such a just fun matchup to see. I don't know who's going to win it. Again, it's an undefeated matchup. Evloev against Murphy. I don't know who I necessarily have yet, but again, it's going to be such a good one, such a good title eliminator. Volk, like I said, is going to be in GOAT territory if he wins at featherweight. I truly believe that he is the featherweight GOAT already, but you solidify it, you pour it in concrete, and now he is the GOAT. I would love to see it. Even if you lose this bout, whoever loses Lerone Murphy or Evloev, you can make the argument that they still deserve a title shot after they do a rebound fight. There's arguments to be made all across. I love this fight. I love the matchup. And then moving into, obviously, Diego Lopez just losing the rematch against Volk. I love the fight against Yair Rodriguez. These guys already have kind of previous beef. They got into it at the presser at 314 earlier. I think both of these guys have good stories. They both have, had title shots. Put these guys in the cage. See what happens. Fight night, maybe you could do it, co-main event. You just give yourself options with this one, and you eliminate the beef. I think both these guys would want to fight each other. I think you'd see some really cool submission attempts, maybe a knockout. I would probably lean Diego Lopez right off the rip, but Yair Rodriguez is incredibly dangerous. He's fought some of the best in featherweight, some of the best that have moved up and down in different divisions. I like this fight. I think that this just settles the animosity between the two, and maybe you make the argument that this could be like an alternate for a championship bout. So you never know. I think it just kind of opens up the division a little bit, especially kind of putting Yair Rodriguez in somewhere because he's kind of the odd man out in this division right now. And then Aljamain Sterling is currently number 5 somehow. So I've got a couple options for Aljamain Sterling. Yusuf Zalal seems like the likely fight. This would be a grappler stylistic matchup. You'd see a grappler versus grappler. Obviously, Aljamain is incredibly well-rounded, but it's more of a grappler, or at least known as that. And it'd be a good test for Zalal. Zalal hasn't really fought anyone significant as of yet, so you fight Aljamain Sterling, you put yourself solidly in the top 5. You kind of can give yourself maybe the loser of the Lerone Murphy Evloev fight. You could maybe fight Diego Lopez next. You kind of just put yourself in a good spot. John Silva, we know, is just super marketable. The UFC seems to want to push this guy really, really hard. So you put Gene Silva into a title picture if he beats Aljamain Sterling. I don't know where they wanted to go. It seems like Yusuf Zalal is the fight. It hasn't been announced yet, but it seems like that's the way that the UFC wants to go. We'll see if that actually happens. I do like Gene Silva, and this is just a teaser. Look at this one, man. Makeziel Costa absolutely destroying Dan Ige. Shout out Dan Ige, rest in peace. We love the 50K, now 100K Dan Ige, but Makeziel Costa is an absolute freak. Look at the stylistic matchup. You've got these super fun strikers fighting each other. Obviously, Makeziel Costa didn't really get to showcase his grappling, but he's great at grappling. John Silva would talk a lot of shit. They're both Brazilian. This would be an absolute masterclass, and it's a little early. I know that it's a little early, but neither of these guys are in the top 5, but I just got really excited looking at it, and I think Mackenzie Acosta is a top 10 fighter and deserves to be in that. And so this is the most exciting fight. I mean, this could easily be a fight night main event. I wouldn't even hit it as a co-main event for a number card. It just gives you options. Again, all of these fights, I'm trying to give the UFC options so you can potentially make more title pictures, clean up some of these like difficult, clogged up divisions, and make it more fluid. So I think this fight would be absolutely insane. I don't know if they want to risk Gene Silva getting beat because they're trying to push him so hard, for reasons that we all know. We're not going to name names, but yeah, the Big N knows what he's doing here. But Campbell Acosta, man, I'm a big fan of him. I think this would be such a fun matchup, and I do think that he would have a legitimate chance to beat Gene Silva. And Gene Silva, again, super marketable. It just makes sense. Moving into the lightweight division, one of the more nightmarish divisions based on what's going on at the very top. But we have interim belt Justin Gaethje against Ilya. This is the fight to make. This is likely the main event of the White House card. Ilya finally kind of cleared up all his stuff's outside the cage. Gaethje holds the interim belt after beating Paddy. Just makes sense. It's going to be the fight. It hasn't been announced, but it's almost officially unofficial. And then you have Charles Oliveira fighting Max Holloway. This is the BMF belt for 326 in a couple weeks. I like the fight. Think it's going to be exciting. 326 kind of looks like ass right now. They need a co-main event, and we're less than 2 weeks away. If it's Caio Borrello versus De Ridder, I mean, okay, but I think that there should be one more in between those two. Nonetheless, this is an awesome fight. I don't know where they're going to go with either of these guys afterwards. I don't know if they're going to give a title shot or where they're going to go from it, but good fight. Really like it, and it's already on the books. This fight is not. We have Benoit, God of War Saint Denis versus Arman Tsarukyan. You need a fight for Arman, and if you're not going to give him a title shot, I believe that this is the next best thing you can do for Arman. You give him someone who is incredibly dangerous, someone who has knockout power, is on a great fight win streak, and you feed him to Arman, and I think Arman wins this one. I think his grappling is really going to show. You make almost a inexcusable argument that he deserves a title shot if he beats Benoit Saint Denis. If Ilya moves up, then you easily have something that you could make as a title shot or a title bout. This is something that makes sense. There's a lot of different options you can go depending on what Ilya wants to do in the division. Arman deserves a title shot, but if you're not going to give it to him, this is the next best thing, and these guys are both incredibly exciting, have great fan bases behind them. Another fight that just makes a lot of sense right now. And then this is one of my favorite ones that I have, and these guys aren't in the top 5 currently, Paddy Pimblett versus Dan Hooker, but these dudes have been talking so much shit on Twitter. Let's just settle it. Let's get it done. Paddy coming off against such a just awful loss against Justin Gaethje, but he didn't get knocked out. He didn't get submitted. He was able to stand and for better or for worse, finish the fight. But Dan Hooker obviously getting mauled by Benoit Saint Denis and getting some fun allegations on Twitter. We're not going to get into that so much, but both of these guys, have a lot of shit talking. I think the press conferences would be super, super exciting. I think you would see a lot of animosity, some really good clip farming content that the UFC can post all over YouTube and Twitter. It just makes sense, and it's something that you could make as a, again, fight night main event. You could make it in London. You could make it in Wales. You could make it kind of wherever, or not Wales, Perth. You could make it kind of wherever you wanted. Wherever you wanted to take this one, it would make sense. I think that that doing it in England would make the most sense, just because you want Paddy to have that kind of rebound fight. They're really trying to push Paddy. I think Paddy wins this one pretty easily, but they've been talking shit. Let's get it settled. There's no better way to do it than just outright fighting, and I think it's a fight that makes way too much sense for this division. Moving into bantamweight, we have this monstrosity, Islam versus Ian Gary. This seems to be the way that it's going to go. I deserve a title shot. I beat Shavkat Rakhmonov. He's coming. He's going to retire. He's going to retire, and I deserve a title shot. And yeah, we're going to get that bullshit again, so that's great. But, someone has to fight Islam. And if it's not going to be Ilya, if it's not going to be Shavkat, I think Ian Gary makes enough sense to make it happen. He's beaten Carlos Prates, barely lost to Shavkat. It's a fight that makes sense. I think Islam easily wins this one. I know there's a big height difference and reach difference in this one, but I'm not doubting Islam ever. I mean, brother, he's the go-to grappler. Like, we know what's going to happen in this one, but it's the only one that really makes sense. I don't think Michael Morales is quite ready yet, and you'll see what I'm about to do with Michael Morales. I just think this one is the most likely. Again, this could probably be another White House fight. Makes sense. Both these guys have good fandoms. Makes just enough sense where I'm like, okay, but not happy with it. JDM versus Carlos Prates. Yeah, I'm speaking for everyone, we all win if we get this fight. JDM and Carlos Prates have already been calling each other out. They want this fight. I think the UFC would want to have this fight. This could be a main event. This is something that would be a badass fight. JDM obviously just coming off a loss against Islam. Carlos Prates coming off a absolute insane win against Leon Edwards. It just makes sense, and I don't know. You're going to see someone die in this fight, and I love the way that this would be a title elimination bout. Put the winner of this one up against Islam. Heaven forbid Ian Gary wins, or we'll never hear the end of it. So I won't ever wish that into existence. But this would just be a good title eliminator bout, and I think it's something that would be such a fun, stylistic matchup for both of these guys. Michael Morales is up next, and I'm going to put Kamaru Usman up against him. And the reason being is that the UFC seems to want to push Kamaru Usman against Islam, the used to be GOAT of welterweight, so quote unquote, versus the up and comer like big ghost of the division who's killing everybody. This fight would be really, really weird to make, and it's probably one of the ones that I'm like least certain of, just because I don't know if Michael Morales wants to make this fight Kamaru Usman wants to make this fight just because of how dangerous Michael Morales is. But at least you put Kamaru Usman in the way of, okay, if he wants to fight Islam and he wants that opportunity and the UFC wants that opportunity, you have to fight someone in this top 5 of this absolute stacked welterweight division. Put him against someone who is an absolute like demon, and if he beats him and he's able to win, then you have such an incredible argument that's almost completely like you can't argue against Kamaru Usman at that point. He's 7 in the rankings right now. Obviously, Michael Morales is, I think, 3 or 2. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but this would at least, I'm trying to validate what the UFC is trying to do, unfortunately, with trying to push Kamaru Usman against Islam. And if Michael Morales wins, you beat one of the GOATs. You have another great guy that you fought in just a resume builder, and it's almost like an undeniable title shot if he does win. It's a really good matchup in my mind where it kind of lets the UFC have an opportunity to do what they want. Another name for Michael Morales, and I think Michael Morales wins. I just think it's a good segue into trying to do what the UFC wants to do with Kamaru Usman and gives Michael Morales a good name. And then finally, this was a tough one, man. Remember the name. Yeah, we never remember Bilal Muhammad. I forgot he was even in the top 5. But Bilal against the winner of Sean Brady and Joaquin Buckley. I think that makes a lot of sense. Bilal already beat Sean Brady, so I don't know if that would be like a great rematch, but it was just tough to try to find a matchup for Bilal right now. I think he's going to stay pretty inactive for a little while, so I don't think they're going to try and push anything, but just for the sake of trying to find him a matchup, maybe you put him against Joaquin Buckley. I think it would make at least a little bit of sense. But this one was a tough one. I really don't know or think that this is a good like matchup necessarily. I just think that it's something that at least you could kind of like talk yourself into of one of these guys deserves maybe a top 5 shot. They're both coming off pretty not great losses. Buckley against Usman, Sean Brady getting mauled by Michael Morales. There's opportunity to try and get back on the horse and get back on track against Bilal Muhammad, who is on a losing streak right now. It's just kind of tough to try and do a matchup. That's just really my opinion for this, and I, kind of struggle to find it. Moving into middleweight, we'll talk about I kill everybody. Oh man, he wants to move up to light heavyweight, but watched the press conference last night. Dana White mentioned Khamzat Chimaev saying, hey, he needs to defend his belt first. I think the UFC is really going to push for him to defend his belt, and who better to fight against? Oh, dude, I'm going to beat that Chechen. I'm not going to say it, but we know what Sean Strickland was saying. Also, they cut the mic on him. Shout out free speech. That's no longer a thing anymore. But Sean Strickland, Khamzat Chimaev, it makes sense. Both of these guys have great fan bases. Obviously, Sean Strickland absolutely mauled one of my GOATs. We're not even going to talk about it, dude. Oh, dude, it was so bad. Fluffy Hernandez, it just sucks. It really does suck. All my Houston and Texas fighters just did not have a good day yesterday, and I really didn't either. So we're not even going to talk about it. Sean Strickland, has a great fan base. It makes sense. This fight buildup would be absolutely elite. Both of these guys are already shit-talking on Twitter. I think Strickland passes up Imavov in popularity. It just makes more sense. And if Imavov deserves the title shot more than Sean Strickland, I I just don't. I don't even see that argument being necessarily true. I mean, Sean Strickland has only lost to Dricus du Plessis, and at least in the last couple of years, I think that Sean Strickland has a really, really strong argument to take on Khamzat, and I think it makes sense in the grand scheme of Khamzat staying at middleweight and not moving up to light heavyweight. And I agree with Dana, by the way. He needs to defend his belt at middleweight before he moves on to light heavyweight. But he does look absolutely massive right now. It's insane. He looked huge in that video that was circulating on Twitter of him reacting to Sean Strickland. He looks huge. So, I don't know. Maybe he's not coming back to middleweight. Maybe we can just put another Sean Strickland, maybe Nasruddin Imavov as a title shot. I don't know. But moving into Imavov, take on Dricus du Plessis. This one's a little bit difficult to try and conceptualize, but I think if you're going to put Dricus against anybody, make it a title eliminator against Nasruddin Imavov. Nasruddin Imavov doesn't have any big names that I'm necessarily like wowed by up to this point. So if you beat Dricus, then you have almost an undeniable claim to get a title shot. If Dricus wins, maybe if Sean Strickland beats Khamzat, maybe you get a trilogy bout against Sean Strickland, Dricus. I don't know really what you can do, but it doesn't make a ton of sense in the scheme of like Dricus. But I think for Imavov, it gives him a name, and I think for Dricus to beat someone who's like surging up the rankings, it's also a really good showing. You just maybe if Khamzat wins, you can maybe do when he fights maybe in 2028, like he likely will. Maybe you make the Dricus rematch. There's ways you can go about it and kind of make it make sense, but I don't know necessarily if this is like the greatest matchup. But have to fight somebody, and it's the one that I could kind of talk myself into. Then we have oh my. Yeah, dude. Fluff Hernandez, not a great loss, but he's got some options here, and I think that I'm going to give him the options of fighting the winner of Caio Borrello versus Reinier de Ridder. You've got two different stylistic matchups. Obviously, Caio Borrello is going to be a little bit more of a well-rounded fighter, maybe more striking. Fluff Hernandez apparently has striking now, so that's kind of cool. Only attempted one takedown versus Sean Strickland. What a great game plan. I can't believe we did that. So if he fights Reinier de Ridder, you got a good grappling matchup, and then both these guys will gas out in the second round, and then we get to see them blob around for another, 15 to 20 minutes. It's awesome. But I think this fight makes sense. You've got, a kind of a rebound fight for Fluffy Hernandez. If he's able to get through these two, or one of these two, I think you have an argument to get him into a title eliminator against maybe Dricus or Imavov. Maybe you just want to have him a couple more fights, and you just have options with this one. If de Ridder or Borrello is able to beat Fluffy Hernandez, then they're in the top 5. Then you're able to kind of surge them into title picture area. So there's a lot of different options for this one as well. Again, I'm just like the options. I like the way that the UFC would look after these fights, and I think it makes sense. I think this is something that timeline-wise would make a lot of sense as well. And then we have Brendan Allen taking on the winner of Israel Adesanya versus Joe Pyfer. I think that this is another one that is pretty, it makes sense in my mind. I don't see Joe Pyfer beating Israel Adesanya, by the way. But Izzy has said he doesn't really want to fight in the title picture anymore. I don't know if he really means that, but if he does, this would be a good fight. It's a fun matchup that you could do as a fight night. Maybe you make it in just I could see it. Oh man, where could I see this one? Maybe in Louisville or somewhere in the United States. Maybe you make the argument for somewhere in Australia. You have options for this one. If he fights Joe Pyfer, if Brendan Allen fights Joe Pyfer, it's not really what I think is going to happen, but it's not a horrible argument there. I just think that Izzy versus Brendan Allen would be a good fight and would make sense as far as where the division stands right now. Moving into light heavyweight. So this is going off of if and when it looks like Alex Pereira is going to move into heavyweight. So we'll talk about heavyweight in just a second, but let's talk about Yuri versus Olberg. This seems to be the fight to make. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the 327 main event. I think they're just kind of finalizing some things, but Yuri deserves a title shot. Carlos Olberg, top 5, makes sense. No one wants to see Ankalaev fight for another title shot and see that crap happen again, but these two fighting immediately make a lot of sense. They both are, big strikers, just makes sense logistically. And then I have Ankalaev fighting the winner of that one. I think Ankalaev losing to Pereira wasn't great, but I think at least you have to have him fight somebody, and I don't see him fighting some of these lower ranked light heavyweights. I mean, does he fight Roundtree? I don't think that makes sense. Does he fight like I don't see it? Maybe like maybe Azamat Murzakaliev. I don't see that, and I think that they're going to push Ankalaev to try and get into the top 5, or he's already in the top 5, but trying to get into a title shot. And I think it makes sense as far as his timeline goes. You fight the winner of this one, maybe you fight the loser. There's options for it, so I think that makes sense for Ankalaev. Moving into Khalil Roundtree, I have him taking on the winner of Azamat Murzakaliev versus Paulo Costa. I think this is a get back in the business fight for Khalil Roundtree. He's gotten pieced up recently, obviously by Yuri. We all saw that Alex Pereira fight. That was really tough to see for Roundtree fans. But I think this is a fight that Roundtree could very easily win. Azamat Murzakaliev is a good, guy moving into the division. I think that he's a decent stylistic matchup. Paulo Costa moving into the light heavyweight division from the middleweight division would make sense. He's got a lot of fandom behind him. It's just a fight that would make sense in somebody that could get Roundtree back on the horse. And I think that the UFC really does like Khalil Roundtree. He's willing to step up. He's willing to get into, some really tough fights, and you want to reward him. Get him someone that he could potentially beat. If he loses, then okay, well, we kind of know where Khalil Roundtree is. He's on a negative decline. We know that we are going to have to put him against like some guys that hopefully don't kill him. So you give yourself options with Roundtree being, back on the horse. Then you maybe move Azamat Murzakaliev into a really good spot. Maybe Paulo Costa has a career revival. You just give yourself a little bit better of options. I don't know if Paulo Costa is really realistic, but maybe. We'll see. And then we have, Jan Blachowicz is still, or Blachowicz, however the hell you say his name. He's still in the top 5 somehow in the big 2-6. So I have him taking on the winner of Dominic Reyes versus Johnny Walker. I think the UFC really likes Johnny Walker. He's super exciting. I think they want to push him, and I think get him into the top 5 and into that title picture in the top 5 makes sense. I think Dominic Reyes and Blachowicz have already fought. So maybe you want to do a rematch. They fought in 2020. That's a while ago. Maybe you want to do something there. Dominic Reyes maybe gets a top 5 shot. It's just, where do you put Blachowicz? You match him up against Guskov. They drew, so maybe you do that. It's just, I don't really know what to do with this back, like 6 through 10 of the light heavyweight division. I think this is just one that makes sense. I could be swayed against it. This isn't something that's like set in stone. Again, it's just my opinion, but this would be a decent one. I wouldn't hate it. And then the heavyweight division. Yeah, our favorite division. This division has been nothing but awesome recently. But the way to fix it. Let's go Poatan, taking on the eye poker himself, Cyril Gane. This is a good either interim belt or a title belt. Something that you could do with the storyline of Alex Pereira being a 3-division champion would just be insane. I think that makes the most sense being an interim belt. And we'll talk about it right now. The winner of this fight takes on Tom Aspinall. Once his eyes are better, if he ever fights again, good luck. You poked me fucking eyes. You poked them out. Cyril Gane, you're a fraud. I think the Pereira-Tom Aspinall fight would be an absolute masterclass and one of the best fights we could possibly see in 2026. If Cyril Gane happens to win, it would be a nightmare. I don't really want to see Cyril Gane do anything ever again. I've hated Cyril Gane since he knocked out my beautiful king Derek Lewis in Houston at 265 and ruined my entire experience because I went to that fight and almost cried. So I don't like Cyril Gane, but at least you have the argument of him beating Alex Pereira where it's like, oh my God, is this dude actually legitimate? Don't poke eyes and maybe this guy can actually win a belt. He's been in the top 3 for better part of 4 years. There's arguments there, but I hope that Alex Pereira and Tom Aspinall would be the fight. It would be an absolute masterclass, and then you could really make the argument of Alex Pereira being the all-time UFC GOAT. There's just so many different ways you can do it. Tom Aspinall defending his belt against Alex Pereira would be absolutely insane. Good fight to make. And then Sergey Pavlovich is somehow in the top 5 this heavyweight division. Golly, man. I'll just move into this next slide. Yes, you've got options here. All right, we'll talk about Marcin Tybura versus Walter Walker. I mean, maybe Marcin Tybura doesn't suck. That's kind of my argument. Walker is one of the better prospects in the division. He's heel hooking everyone. Hopefully he heel hooks Marcin Tybura, and then you try and push him into the top 5, and then you've got at least 2 decent prospects in the top 5, that being Salsa Boy and Walter Walker. So you've got options there if he beats Sergey Pavlovich. Sergey Pavlovich is still a decent, solid heavyweight, but who do you match him up against? And you got to have him fight somebody, and then you make the Sergey v. Sergey matchup. Sergey Spivak, absolutely. You beat Ante Delija. Ante Delija is a fake and a fraud, dude. I feel like Alex Jones. He's an absolute terrorist of the division. He sucks, dude. Ante Elijah's been nothing but a disappointment since coming over to the UFC. Got mauled by this freaking man-child, and maybe you make the Sergey v. Sergey fight if you really want to just try and move people around in the division. I don't know if it makes a lot of sense logistically, but it's an option, and I made options for this one. This was a tough fight to try and figure out. And then we have, finally, Curtis Blades against Waldo Cortez Acosta. This makes the most sense. They already, Salsa Boy already called him out. I keep trying to call him Chris Curtis. Curtis Blades needs an opponent. I think this one makes sense. Both of these guys are big athletes in this division. The takedowns would be elite from Curtis Blades. Salsa Boy has been killing everybody in the heavyweight division. Unfortunately, Derek Lewis, we don't have to talk about it. But this one is the one that makes sense. You know, a good prospect and a good title elimination bout for however the way that these fights turn out. A good way to kind of segue Salsa Boy into title contention. Curtis Blades obviously has lost to Tom Aspinall. I think he's lost to Cyril Gane. He's just the Hall of really good, not Hall of Fame kind of fighter. Match him up against Pereira. I don't even know if Pereira would want that fight, but at least you kind of, I don't really know if you could talk yourself into Curtis Blades, but this is the fight to make, in my opinion. Waldo Cortez Acosta needs one more before he really gets a title shot, so I would make this one. This one can be kind of like a maybe August, September fight. Kind of makes sense on the timeline, and I think if you want to make it sooner rather than later, you can. Salsa Boy seems to be really, really active. So kind of wherever you wanted to go from this one. So hope you liked my predictions. Hope you liked the matchmaking. I love doing matchmaking. It's one of my favorite things to do. Kind of playing the Hunter role or playing the Dana role kind of makes sense. And I want to make these exciting fights and kind of shape up these divisions moving into 2027 where we can have some more exciting fights. So appreciate y'all watching. Again, I apologize for my absolute disaster class on the Houston fight card. Good Lord, I absolutely suck. But if you like the video, like it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Follow the Instagram, follow our Twitter. Check us out, man. We're doing a lot of work, and me and Tristan are putting in effort to try and get this, as much excitement as we possibly can, because the White House card's really throwing a wrench into a lot of things. But appreciate y'all watching. See ya.